Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. The War Within expansion is approaching so soon. In just a handful of weeks, the early preview of the expansion is going to be upon us. And the class of Rogue, which has been my main class for a good bit of the development of Alpha and Beta, has been kind of in the dumps. I haven't really had a lot of positive things to say about this class up until this week. Somewhat recently, we got to take a look at really closely at some of the different nerfs that have happened to classes like shamans, as well as them adjusting their build from a fire into a lightning, some of the changes to warlocks as well as hunters, and in every single one of these dungeons that I got to test out these classes, there've always been a rogue in every single one of them. And these assassination rogues equipped with the Deathstalker hero spec are absolutely demolishing dungeons in AoE content, doing amazing single target damage that cleaves for free to every enemy around them, with envenoms that are hitting for up to 4 million damage a global with a guaranteed critical strike chance. So you know I had to take a closer look at what the hell is going on with the class that I've been maining all this time for the last few expansions. As always, if you guys want to see more regular class updates like these for the War Within, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. Otherwise, let's take a look at what is going on with the rogues as of this week. So to do a rundown as to what has happened to Assassination over the last few weeks, and the answer really is nothing much. We just all of a sudden started seeing this spec popping up. Maybe it could be the fact that we are finally gotten tuned to the point where we could actually do more than damage of that of a tank. And in fact, tanks right now do a lot of damage, and for a good bit we were doing less damage than tanks. That was the plight of rogues. But over the last few weeks, I mean, rogues have gotten buffs after buffs after buffs. By the time you're watching this video, if you are playing in pre-patch, you'll actually be able to see a lot of these buffs go live over in pre-patch in just a handful of days. I mean, Outlaw Rogue ability damage got buffed up by like 40%, with individual spells increased by 10% on top of it, a 20% buff to an auto attacks, Subtlety got buffed up by 20%, Assassination buffs in particular, all ability damage were increased by 10% one week, 4% another, and then 15% a while ago. This is about around the time of like alpha to beta transition for War Within, so that's a pretty sizable increase. Auto attack damage went up by 10% twice on 2 separate weeks, and venom damage amped by 10% on top of all of these, and then Crimson Tempest buffed by, it looks like 19%, plus the energy restoration of venomous wounds got buffed up from 7% per tick to 8%. It's not a lot. Definitely not a lot of energy, but every time you corrode and rupture ticks, you're getting 1 additional energy, and for a handful of ticks, you've gotten basically, we can basically catch up on energy fairly quickly. I don't think this one you will be noticed by a lot of players. What I think it does do is helps out in haste, low haste builds, especially at the beginning of a season, where just getting a bit more energy is going to help smooth out the gameplay just a little bit more compared to what we have right now in pre-patch, where we have a ton of haste from the gear that we have. However, the one thing that really has helped out Assassination, the hero specs, they're finally in a decent shape. Fatebound is a very passive option. Hand of Fate, every time you use a finisher, you flip a coin. Either it lands on a tails, doing instant damage to your target, or a heads, giving you a damage buff. Every time you use a finisher, which is a lot, you keep flipping that coin, and you keep landing on the heads, increasing that self-buff value by a few percent every single time it keeps hitting heads. Or tails, amping up the tails damage, the instant damage, by a handful of percent as well every single time. But numerically, this one has gotten a lot better. It is essentially a passive thing that happens in the background, coin flips, providing you either damage buffs or a damage window. While Fatebound is also mostly passive, it actually did kind of develop a bit of a gameplay hook. Not as in-depth as a Diablos Warlock, which is also passive, but the way that you utilize your soul shards to summon these demons, and the way that these demons amplify your soul shard generation and grant you greater versions of your abilities, I mean, that's just a whole nother level of a perfect example of what a passive hero spec should have been. Or even the Ride of the Apocalypse Death Knight, the fact that Death Knight's gonna mount up on a horse, moving with freedom, while their riders grant them variety of different buffs, like Morgryn grants you passive cleave with a passive death and decay aura. It is a quality of life convenience that is a must-have, and probably one of the better examples of how to do a passive hero spec effectively. Deathstalker doesn't quite fall into that I guess categorization, not quite, but it does actually help complement the spec of Assassination in a very unique way. Deathstalker is a very single-minded hero spec. And Assassination was also a very-minded rogue spec, or single-minded rogue spec, which I think kind of synergizes well together, especially in content like Mythic Plus. Assassination as a spec got a bunch of buffs, but its core playstyle, its core bit of gameplay, is oriented around marking a singular target for death, making sure that they are the focused target, usually either the strongest enemy in a trash bag, the healthiest one in the group, or somebody who's the scariest enemy, the most dangerous one that needs to be eliminated quickly. Assassination is amazing at focusing down specific targets, and you are even rewarded for single target gameplay with talents such as Caustic Spatter, allowing your Mutilate to put a debuff of spatter on the target, causing a portion of all poison damage to be splashed onto nearby enemies. Quite a lot of things count as poison damage from your poison applications to your Envenoms to even Kingsbane. So there's quite a lot of things that fit into that poison moniker, and everything like this splashes. So the more single target damage you do, the more splash damage you can do cleaving enemies, and besides doing big Envenom damage, you could just spread cleaves and bleeds with a big Crimson Tempest, a bunch of Garrotes, a bunch of Ruptures all across the board. So that is the fun part of Assassination. Come in, prep up, bleed everybody around you, find the primary target, and then pummel them down, and while you're attacking them, that Viscera cleaves everything around you. It is an awesome playstyle, and Deathstalker, after a lot of fixes, after a lot of bugs adjustments, and after a lot of capstone and primary ability changes, it is finally in a fully functional state, and it helps complement Assassination so incredibly well in Mythic Plus dungeons. And I had a very, very hard time enjoying Deathstalker for a good bit, but in the current state, it's not perfect, but it is much, much better than where it was. You have Deathstalker's Mark, where every time you ambush a target, or every time you use your capstone, you reapply marks on enemy target, and every time you use a finisher, you deal plague damage to the enemy, which is like a mixture of nature and poison, so you get the benefits of that nature damage over time, buffing up your next ambush and mutilate, which is also really cool. But after 3 of those stacks, after you consume all 3 of them, your next you get the buff of Darkest Night, which grants you immediate energy and tells you that your next Envenom with maximum comm points will be a guaranteed crit, so you want to build those comm points as quick as you can. That ability is also, that Envenom is going to deal 60% additional damage and will reapply Deathstalker's Mark on the target. So this can allow you to create some massive Envenoms with the Deathstalker hero spec. And like I said before, you're very single target focused with Caustic Spatter, and having your Envenoms hit for like 4 million in a perfect setup, it is wild and insanely fun. Best part about this spec is just how hard Envenoms can hit and how much splash damage they can do. You know how when you play, if you played Outlaw Rogue, you have Blade Flurry, right? It kind of just cleaves everything for you as you deal single target damage. Caustic Spatter starts to feel like your own version of Blade Flurry. We deal single target damage and cleave everything around you. Deathstalker continues to support that single-minded playstyle with singular focus. If you deal damage to targets outside of your marked target with the Deathstalker's Mark, they actually take a little bit more plague damage from you. You have a bunch of plague elements and bleed damage, and even a Clear the Witness, which grants you additional comm points, which is a nice little like bonus more than anything. Some players have assumed that maybe you'll start using Phantom Knives in single target for the extra comm points and the additional plague damage. Hard to tell exactly where it's at. Then there's certain passes like an old tier set of Lingering Darkness. Apparently this one is really, really good, even though not a lot of people really enjoy it. After Deathmark expires for 30 seconds, you deal 20% more nature damage. It is a lot of passive damage, and in Mythic Plus situations, it essentially extends your Death Mark window. During Death Mark, you deal a ton of damage. Outside of Death Mark, you continue to deal like residual damage, or you can always go Symbolic Victory. Needs a bit of tuning, but Shiv can empower your next Envenom. Combine this together with your Darkest Night, and you can already see like there's some big Envenoms you could throw out. Plus, you have a very unique defensive options like Ethereal Cloak with additional duration on your Cloak of Shadows, or Evasion grants you magic reduction, while Cloak grants you physical damage reduction, which can be kind of also interesting. Now, Deathstalker and Assassination in general are filled with bugs. There's quite a handful of them, like, for example, Fatal Intent ability. Your damage and abilities against enemies above 20% health have a very high chance to apply Fatal Intent, which deals zero damage. Literally zero damage. They even try to hotfix this thing, and they hotfix it from no damage, like no number, to zero. So no idea exactly what they're trying to do with it. I mean, ideally, maybe it'll be like a very cool execute element ability of the spec. Maybe it'll deal significant damage. We have no idea. But right now it just deals zero damage for a couple of weeks now, so we have no idea. That is the plan of rogues, though. We haven't really had that much effort, or effort sounds really, really bad, but we haven't had as much attention, I'd say, over on the War Within beta. And that is, we really do feel it. Like, I've talked before about how it's so difficult to like commit to maining a rogue going forward for this expansion. This is probably the first week where it starts to kind of feel really, really good to actually play a rogue on the beta. But with the expansion coming out in like 2 weeks, probably not the best time for us to like, oh, now we're starting to feel good. You know what I mean? But Deathstalker, I feel like, ends up synergizing incredibly well with Assassination in Mythic Plus in particular. A lot more rogues are playing Assassination on the beta. Previously, almost no rogue played any spec on the beta for Mythic Pluses. It was a lot of Warlocks running around, playing around with the busted hero specs. It was Death Knights with the much nerfs they've gotten. They continue to just pile out damage like no other. And any other class that we see some kind of a weird bug, or is just overtuned or straight up broken, or anything that's like, you know, Augmentation Evokers also was really, really good just to buff up those broken classes. Because it is beta, nothing is finalized, lots of bugs, lots of issues. Some things are going to hit harder than intended, but yeah, it seems like no rogue was really out in the spotlight, and we've been seeing a lot of Assassination rogues as of recently. Assassination, outside of those things, is actually doing a significant amount of damage with those caustic spatters, with this full single target, single-minded, cleave focus build of Deathstalker. And even the gameplay loop is starting to feel a little bit better. Like, there's not too much of a gameplay loop specifically. You just gotta mark a target, spend 3 finishers, and then you set up a big Darkest Night. But the fun setting up of Darkest Night and trying to max out the damage, I think, has been quite a lot of fun over in the beta. Especially like if, let's say, you have a shiv available, and most likely you'll have double shiv coming back up by the time Kingsbane is back up. Syncing a shiv, maybe together with Symbolic Witch Ray, and getting a 4 million guaranteed crit within Venom. Something about that playstyle in particular feels incredibly good. And I feel like for Assassination, having that guaranteed single target burst almost when you want it, or at least being able to plan around using that ability during a very crucial window, is incredibly satisfying to play into. And Assassination has been able to push out so much damage in dungeons and some of your best trash pulls, where there's just a bunch of mobs everywhere. Bleed everything around you, start spamming those Envenoms, land fat crits with Kingsbane cleaving everything down. Assassination, I feel like, has generally been a bit of like a weird spec where sometimes it's good in Mythic Plus and sometimes it isn't. All depends on the season, all depends on the content. In most cases, players choose to play Outlaw Rogue because it is the default AoE cleave spec. That being said, while Outlaw Rogue can do some amazing damage here and there, and there are some moments we can set up some incredible burst windows, Assassination, I feel like, is on a whole another level with this setup that it got going on right now, with the Deathstalker, with those back-to-back Envenoms in particular, and how you can kind of easily set that combo up every single time. It's become a lot more consistent and actually kind of terrifying at the same time. I've been loving Assassination on the beta so far, and I feel like this is the first time that I'm really, really excited about the class of Rogue over on the beta. Again, like I said before, tuning is still an ongoing thing, and Rogues have gotten buffs after buffs after buffs, and we're still not able to reach some of the heights that some of the other classes can reach, so we don't really know exactly in which direction they're going to go with this class in particular, or with this spec in particular. That being said, Assassination right now in the beta is in an incredible spot, and out of all the things that I've been able to highlight so far, from Warlocks to Hunters to Shamans to Mages, I've talked about all the classes I'm excited about, but this is genuinely the first time I'm really, really excited about the potential of Assassination Rogues to really grow beyond just a class that's really good in raid setting, but potentially really good in Mythic Plus. And after we got Deathstalker mostly working, right? Most of the talents are functional. Now that we got that fully functional, and it's consistent, and it's fully playable, at least in 5-man content, you're really starting to feel that whole massive damage behind Deathstalker, the damage amplification, the guarantee, the removal of RNG from the spec, and I feel like that's where Deathstalker really starts to shine, especially for the spec like Assassination. Of course, it's also really good for Subtlety as well, but testing out compared to Assassination and Assassin being so single target heavy, where it is rewarded for additional cleave damage from high single target damage, it just ends up, I think, synergizing with that so much better. Deathstalker is really good for single target for Subtlety, but for Assassin, it just ends up kind of being a hit-all spec. And I feel like it's just probably the best time and the best part of Deathstalker. It's never felt this good, and right now it has such a nice synergy with Assassination. It actually gets me a bit giddy, which is honestly a very, very good thing. Like I said before, I was very not enthusiastic about the opportunity for rogues to perform well going forward, and I still would be very, very cautiously optimistic about the spec, where it's at and how it's been doing thus far. I think you definitely should be excited at the potential that can come from the spec of Assassination in particular, but still cautious optimism. Have an ult ready, whether it's a hunter, whether it's a mage, whether it's a warlock, and maybe one day I can say that for certain Rogue is looking like an amazing main going forward. I guess we'll see what the next few weeks of the War Within beta show us, and we'll see if the devs maybe surprise us with some kind of like good news in the future. So with that being said, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope all of you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. It would very much help to get this channel and this video out into the YouTube algorithm. Also, join our Discord community. Link to that is in the description of every single one of these videos. It was super refreshing to actually have a bit of a positive take about the class of Rogue, at least for now in the beta. You never really know how tuning is gonna go, but it's at least, it feels like it's finally sort of starting to look up for this class in particular. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I really want to hear what you guys think about the spec, or what you think about its progression, how you feel about it so far, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.